Come Together. I'm pretty sure it's one of the most famous songs of all time, especially for us drummers. So if you want to play it in a pinch, here are all the little details that you need to know and potentially some technique stuff that you might want to know as well. So jumping straight into it, the first thing you've got to know, if you don't know it already, is that Ringo is left-handed. So a lot of this main groove / riff, if you want to call it that, is left-hand led. And that's important to note because of how and where the sticking is placed. You can blag this main groove. You can. There's no rule against it. As long as you're doing triplet, triplet, triplet 1, you're away. It should all be fine. But if you want to play it 100% correctly, then you need to be doing this. And so overbeat 2, left, right, accent that right. Then move your hands over to the high tom. So over to the mid tom. So stick those bits together. Then you just move your right hand down to the floor tom and play another. Accent that last right as well. So stick the tom bit together. So stick it all together. However, like I said, you can blag it. So if you're right hand leading, you can just end up with 2 on the mid top. Something like that. It will sound vaguely correct, especially if you're doing what you can see here. Put tea towels or tote bags or anything material based upon the toms because it means they're all muted and there's no resonance going on to make it sound like it's on the record. So moving on from the intro, we've got the verse groove. There's only a couple points for this. Basically, it's a tom 8th note groove. And if you want to add an accent with the bass drum while you're hitting that right hand, feel free. You can do what you want. Artistic interpretation, but it just sounds good. Now we get to the interesting detail within the verses, which is the kick drum part, where it just cuts down to kick drum and vocals. That section. If you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to reference the song. There's a timestamp just below. Now, what's interesting about this part, and is a very important detail, is that Ringo isn't playing it straight or swung. What do I mean by this? If it was straight, you'd be hearing it as E and or if it was swung, or E and It's kind of in this weird mixed space in between. Don't ask me what percent swing this is, but it's kind of in the middle, vaguely. So as long as you pay attention to that detail, it'll sound a little bit more authentic as well. The next thing we have to really pay attention to, and the major change that starts to happen, is in the third intro. Everything else in the hands is the same. All that stuff, exactly the same. But you're going to now, as you're playing through the toms, play 8th notes on your kick drum. It just adds an extra layer of intensity. Whatever combination you choose to do on top, just as long as you've got that kick drum going through the bottom, just to give it that extra drive that you want. So the next big thing we're going to look at is playing fills like Ringo. They don't specifically have to be like the ones on Come Together, but I will give you kind of Come Together-ish-esque Ringo-style fills. And to play like Ringo, there's a couple principles you have to bear in mind. If you feel like getting real fancy with it and carrying on playing left-hand led, feel free, because you will come up with combinations that sound more Ringo-like. But you can still sound like Ringo without doing that, and here's how. The first thing I'd say is make sure you feel quite laid back. Relax while you're playing these fills. That's number one. Number two, make sure you're putting enough space in these fills. He's not doing gospel chops. He's not blast beating his way through these fills. Stick to 16th notes, kind of tops, really, and make sure you're adding space. He really likes to do, especially at the beginning of his fills, a It's hard to tell exactly what sticking he's using, but it's that kind of vibe. And a lot of the times he does like to make sure he goes round the drum kit like a classic drum fill would. And finally, one last detail you can add in is a little bit of a drag, maybe in your left or your right, just going into said fills. If you want to put a bass drum underneath it at all, I'd stick to either or quarter notes underneath while you're doing it, because he doesn't tend to do anything more technical than that. With Come Together, as long as you stick to, you're kind of in the clear. And this applies actually to a number of other Beatles songs as well. If you want to add that little drag in as well, double left, you're away. Add the bass drum. If you want the full notation, then feel free to follow the link below. If you want a full-on, in-depth tutorial about how to play this, then feel free to check out other ones on YouTube. This is just to give you an overall important points kind of look at each song. So at last we're at the final chorus. Nothing too in-depth going on here, but compared to the previous ones, I've just been... We're now going to be hitting the right foot and floor tom and snare drum at the same time. Just again, adds that extra layer of intensity. If you want to hear what I'm talking about here in context, feel free to follow the link below to the actual song and the timestamp. And at last, the final kind of outro solo part. You can keep applying the same things when it comes to the fills. Maybe make the grooves a little bit more intricate, a bit louder, a bit more intense. One more thing he does do, Ringo I mean, is just do a couple triplet fills as well that kind of build upon the initial grooves. So that kind of thing. Feel free to make up whatever combination you like. You can add whatever zhuzh you want to it, as long as you aren't going out and... it just... Try not to ruin the feel of it too much. Keep things nice and relaxed. Don't make them too busy, and you should be fine. So that's come together. Hopefully all the important points have been covered. Like I said, if you want full tutorials, check them out on YouTube. But if you want the full score, that's available below. But other than that, happy playing. Have a great day. Big love.